Hey again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cat Shorts as we take a look at big ideas of the Christian faith in small packages, walking along the way with some wisdom from our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, and his small catechism. We've been taking a look for the last several episodes at what we, at least we in the Lutheran branch of the Christian family tree, think about happening at this thing called Holy Communion. Today we're going to cap that off with one more conversation. So grab your Martin Luther hat or your 16th century reformers headgear equivalent, and let's have maybe the most meaty conversation we've had so far. We have said for more than a few episodes now that part of our tradition, at least folks who are aspiring to be somewhere in the same ballpark as Martin Luther, who sort of saw himself trying to be as faithful to the scriptures as possible, we've said that there are these moments in our life as the people of God, as the church, where something happens that isn't just a metaphor, isn't just, well, this is sort of a neat symbol for this, but aren't magic, but are mystery, or are the churchy word for it is sacrament. And if it seems like a rarely used word, because it's only just a handful of times that we call things sacraments, that's rightly so, because there's no other good exact description of what happens in these moments, in these events, in these actions that happen in the church. Something, we say, happens when someone is baptized. That it wasn't just sort of a neat water ceremony, but that you're basically no different than you were beforehand. Something happens, and at the same time, something happens when we gather for Holy Communion, but not that it's sort of magic, that I can now take the bread that the minister gives me, and now I can go crumble it on top of my garden and get bigger zinnias. It's not magic. It's not metaphor. It's mystery. And when we say mystery, not in the sense of it's completely unknowable, but that something real is happening that is beyond our ability to put into words. But maybe we can sort of get there by analogy. When we ask the question, when our older brother in the faith sort of gets around to asking, well, what do we think actually happens when we receive Holy Communion? He's willing to say, sort of echoing the words of Jesus, this has something to do with forgiveness of sins. Wow, okay, I can be forgiven, if I eat the bread, then that makes me forgiven? That kind of sounds like we're in the territory of magic, or that it's simply a matter of like God sitting up in heaven going, I don't really forgive you, but if you eat the magic bread, I guess I have to. That again, I think we're headed into the dangerous territory of misunderstanding communion as something magical. Instead, I want to suggest we go back to an idea we talked about a few episodes ago about how to do things with words, right? There are sometimes in what we sometimes call performative speech, where the thing I say actually makes something happen, right? I'm a pastor. I get to say things when people get married, like, because of the promises this couple has made, I now officially pronounce you husband and wife, or something like that. It's not magic, but I've been designated as the person to say, you've made the promise, it's official, you all witnessed it, they're now married. And my signature on a piece of paper that goes to the courthouse makes this as official gets, at least legally speaking. So there are other times, maybe, where you can do things with your words. I want to think, for example, about how forgiveness happens. When you and somebody you care about have a falling out, an argument or something like that, you may decide before you speak to that person that you're going to let it go. You may decide sort of in your own heart, you know what, I don't need to hold this against them anymore. I don't need to be holding a grudge. I need to be able to move on. I need to let go so we can start over. I'm ready to let go, right? Now, you, at some point, then may go to the other person for their sake, not for yours, really, but because they need to hear it. You may go and utter the actual sentence, I forgive you. And something happens in that moment. Not magical. It's not like somewhere in some invisible bank ledger, at that moment, the thing they've done wrong against you disappears from their imaginary ledger of wrongs or debts against you. You've already decided to let it go. But in the speaking of it, something real happens. You communicate that forgiveness to the other person. And that's an important piece of how reconciliation happens, how the relationship is restored. So if I'm the person who has wronged you and I'm the one in need of forgiveness, I might, see you walking at a distance, and before you've told me you forgive me, I might wonder, they're a decent person. I hope they've forgiven me. I hope they've been able to let go of that thing that I did or that thing that I said. But it becomes real in a whole new way when somebody says the sentence, I forgive you. And when that happens, it's not magic, but something really happens to our relationship that allows me to know it really is real. You really have let go. You really have forgiven me. I want to suggest that what happens in communion, when we talk about this being a way that forgiveness is accomplished, is something like that performative speech. That again, it's not like God sitting up in heaven saying, I've imbued the bread with magic forgiveness powers, and whoever eats it, even if I don't really know what their story is, I guess I have to honor and forgive them. It's more like, that's the way God gets through to us. That's God's performative speech. So here in this bread, which points us to what Jesus has accomplished, has done for us at the cross, forgiveness happens. The same way when I say to you, I forgive you, something really happens there that makes new possibilities open up in our relationship, even if I've already before that decided I'm going to let this go. That's what I want to suggest happens at communion. That it's not that we keep needing to celebrate communion because God, in some sort of divine accounting, needs to keep issuing new forgiveness notices to cancel new debts that we've accomplished. Again, I think sometimes we end up treating communion like that, like it's simply a matter of divine accounting. I messed up yesterday, I took communion last week, that wiped off last week's sins, I messed up again, now I have to take communion again, and I have to do the proper things to get in the right state of mind so I can take communion, so I can get this new round of debts taken off my ledger. That's not it. But for every time we find ourselves out of sync with God, out of step in broken relationship with God, we need to hear that you are forgiven. I forgive you. And sometimes we need something concrete that makes it real, so that I know it's not really dependent on God saying, well, I forgive you because you're such a perfect peach, or you're such a nice fellow, or because you're trying hard. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with what Christ has done for me at the cross, what Christ has done for me, not what I promised to do for God, what I could do for God, or all my good intentions. When I receive the bread, when we receive the cup, when we share in this thing called communion, it's God's way of getting through to us again and again and again and again. No matter how frequently or rarely it happens, the thing that happens is God speaking to us in performative speech. I forgive you. We can start over again. It's not because God needs it to keep happening in order to properly balance the divine checking account. It's that we keep needing to hear it. And so God keeps saying it. God keeps communicating it to us. So that's our conversation on Holy Communion for right now. We can have further conversation on other depths of this thing called Holy Communion maybe later in another format. But thanks for watching, and thanks for joining us here on Cat Shorts.